One way to make a modern digital photograph stand out from the crowd is to turn back the hands of time using Photoshop and mimic an antique colour effect. Here we have a gentle wash of colour and a nice vignette with some picture noise, and that's mimicking the old effect of actually taking a black and white print and then hand painting in some colours. So it's a mixture of an artistic effect and a photographic effect, and it ends up with quite a nice romantic looking shot like this, especially when you compare it to the clean, clinical, grain-free digital version. Let me just pop up the layers palette so you can see what we're going to end up with. You've got a vignette on this top layer, which is burning in some tone around the edge and helping us draw attention to the photograph. Then we've got a sepia layer, which is a colour fill layer we'll add later. We can then add picture noise using a grain filter or a noise filter, and here we have the colour layer and the black and white version blending together using blending modes and opacity changes. But let's kick off by starting from scratch using antique colour before. And then we need to get the layers palette up. If it's not already there, go to Window, Layers, or you might need to drag it from the palette bin, and then we'll take the background layer, double click to unlock it, and click OK to apply the change. The little padlock icon should disappear, and we can now make that layer editable. Next thing to do is to duplicate it by dragging it onto the Create New Layer icon at the bottom here, and that gives you a layer called Layer 0 Copy. So with the top layer targeted, you can then go to Enhance and go to Convert to Black and White, and that gives you the Convert to Black and White command, and there's a variety of different presets that do dramatically different things to the shot depending on its colours, and the one we're going to go for is Urban Landscapes. That gives you a nice monochrome version. This is standing out quite nicely here, but we've also got some petal detail. We can increase the contrast a little bit. If you drag that to the right, you can see that it's tweaking the contrast slightly. If you're not sure what value you're using, you can see there's a +10 has appeared. I went for a very subtle +5. It's quite fiddly to get it to actually go to the exact values you want, because you can't see as you slide what the numbers are, but you can then move on afterwards and see the contrast change is +5 like so. Click OK to apply the change, and you'll then get a monochrome version of your layer. It is slightly solarized. It changes the tones a little bit and gives a little bit more of a painted look, but that creates a kind of artificial feel to the shot, which is in line with its retro hand-painted effect. Now what we're going to do is drop this layer below this layer like so, and then change the blending mode to mix the two together. So target the top layer by clicking here, and then we can play around with the blending mode. Just click here and then use the down arrows, and you'll see some dramatic changes as you work through the different blending modes like so. And the one I'm after is actually soft light, so I'll just keep on going down until we get this effect. So you get a much darker tone there now on the shadows, and you get a more delicate looking range of colours in the rest of the shot, which helps you give that kind of vintage feel. We can make it even more subtle by reducing the opacity to around about 69, 68, something like that. So that's one step towards our antique colour effect, but to get it less clean and clinical, we could add some grain, and to do that we're going to click here to create a new layer, which is where our grain is going to be. We're going to fill that initially with grey. If you go to Edit Fill Layer, you can then bring up this command here and choose 50% grey from the Contents drop-down menu. Click OK to add grey to the layer. Next thing to do is add some texture to this grey layer now. The grey is just our basic foundation. We're actually going to filter this by going to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Then set this to 300% for the amount. Distribution can be Gaussian and tick monochromatic. Click OK to apply the change, and at the moment, if we're viewing at 100%, our noise is a little bit too generated, computer generated, very clinical. It looks very sharp and unrealistic. So for a more organic looking film grain effects, we're going to blur it. We're going to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. It gives us a nice organic blur effect, especially on a radius of 1.8. You can see these little clumps of grain there. So click OK to apply the change. Now I'm currently viewing this at 1:1 at 100%, but I'm going to go back to fit screen like so. So the noise will look much smaller. And then what we'll do is change the blending mode of the noise layer to multiply to help blend some of the noise with the background layer. So if you click on multiply, you get this sort of effect. Here it's very strong at the moment, so we need to change the opacity and take that down for a much more subtle effect. So something like 42 should do the trick. Again, you can't really see the noise too well at this sort of range, but if you go back to 1:1 again, you get a much better idea of the grain effect. So let's pop back to fit screen for the moment and continue editing our vintage colour effect. Now the colours are looking okay, but the grey here is looking very sort of cold, and we need to warm things up and also create a more vintage sepia colour wash to the image. To do that, I'm going to take an option from down here. I'm going to choose solid colour from this icon here, which is a create new fill or adjustment layer icon, and our solid colour will appear in this window here, and we can choose a more effective sepia either by clicking around here and trying to drag it organically, or just typing in some numbers to get it to be the same as the magazine version of the tutorial. So if we type in 188 for this one here, and then go down to green and type in 147, and then take that down to around about 88 for the blues, and that should give us a precise sepia tone effect. Click OK to take that colour change. Now to make this a more subtle wash of sepia, we're going to change the layer blending mode to soft light, and that helps us blend with the other tones and textures and colours in the background. And for a more subtle blend, we'll take the opacity down to around about 72%. And finally, what we need to do is just burn in a bit of a vignette around the edge of the frame to draw attention to the flower. We could do that by merging all of these layers, but it might be quite nice to have them accessible later. So what I can do is create a version of the file which is flat, but keep the layers preserved at the same time. And to do that, hold down the Alt key and go into Layer and choose Merge Visible, which is this one down here. And when you click, you get a version of all of the layers combined together, and it preserves the layers below so you can access and tweak the blending modes and experiment a little bit more in the future if you need to. So to create a retro organic looking vignette effect, let's grab this tool here, which is the burn tool. If you click and hold down, you can choose that from the other options in this little compartment, and set the range to shadows, exposure to 9. I'm just going to hit tab to get rid of the floating windows, but make sure you are targeting the top layer, and then what you can do is just gently spray around the edge of the frame just to slowly and gradually darken the shot. And it depends how subtle the effect needs to be. You can just keep on spraying until you get darker corners and you get a fairly rectangular looking vignette effect, which just adds a bit of romance to the shot, especially with the subject matter that we have there, and also a bit of mystery and mood as well, which would be great for enhancing a portrait. So there you go, there's your antique colour effect with some film grain and a vignette.